Hans Wilsdorf was born on March 22, 1881, in Kulmbach, a small town in Germany. His family belonged to the middle class. His father was a merchant and his mother was a housewife, caring for the children. Hans also had two older brothers. The Wilsdorf family lived modestly but happily. There were always clocks in the house, which his father considered a symbol of punctuality and success. It was in his childhood that Hans first heard how clocks could talk, setting the rhythm of life with their ticking. When Hans was 12, the family experienced a tragedy. First, his mother died from an illness, and a few months later, his father passed away. The orphaned boy was placed under the care of his uncle, the owner of a small factory. Life changed drastically. Instead of a cheerful and cozy home, Hans found himself in a strict, almost ascetic environment. His days were filled with hard work and strict rules. His uncle made the children get up early, help around the house, and work at the factory. In his free time, Hans loved to be alone with books and watches, which he repaired out of curiosity. He admired the precision of the mechanisms and dreamed that one day he would be able to create something just as perfect. However, Hans's dreams were met with mockery. "What nonsense, Hans. You'll never become a watchmaker. You need to think about real work." But the boy did not give up. He was quiet but persistent. Hope grew in his heart. In his youth, Hans decides to leave his uncle's house. He understands that if he stays in Kulmbach, his life will not change. At 17, he enters a boarding school in Germany, where he receives a good education and discovers the world beyond his small province for the first time. After finishing school, Hans gets a job at a watch company in Switzerland. He finds himself in the heart of watchmaking, a country known for its master craftsmen. Here he becomes an apprentice in a company that exports watch movements. This was the first real step towards his dream. Working in the watch company reveals the scale of possibilities to Hans. He is amazed by the precision of Swiss mechanisms, but he is haunted by the thought, why are wristwatches so undervalued? Why are they considered frivolous? He starts thinking about creating watches that would not only be stylish, but also as accurate as pocket watches. One evening, while watching his mentor discuss the export of mechanisms with foreign clients, Hans says, "What if wristwatches become the new standard? Convenience, accuracy, beauty, all in one." His mentor just laughs. "Hans, forget about it. Wristwatches will never be popular. It's an accessory for ladies. The world will always choose pocket watches." But this idea takes root in his mind. Hans understands that this is a chance to change the world, but he doesn't yet know how. Hans returns home after another workday at the watch company. He receives a letter from his family reminding him of the need to help with money. This becomes another burden on his shoulders. "I can't afford to dream," he thinks. This moment highlights the hero's crisis. Hans stands at the threshold of a choice: risk it and follow his dreams, or stay in the safe but limited zone of his current job. After an internal struggle, Hans decides not to give up, but he realizes that he lacks the experience and resources to turn his dream into reality. One day, at an international watch event in Geneva, fate brings him together with Alfred Davis, a British entrepreneur who is in love with the Swiss watch industry and is looking for new business opportunities. Alfred notices that Hans, although young, has a special perspective on things. During a coffee break, he approaches him and starts a conversation. He explains that he has long been thinking about launching a brand that could change the perception of watches, but he cannot find a suitable partner to implement this idea. Hans begins to understand that he is facing a chance that could change his life. Alfred shares his experience in business and advises on how to create a strong brand focused on the future. He also explains that it is necessary not just to create a product, but to develop an entire brand philosophy that will resonate with consumers. It takes more than just precision and reliability. People need to believe that wearing a watch is not only convenient, but also prestigious. Hans feels that he has found someone who can guide him. He decides that he needs to move forward and no longer be afraid of ambition. But Alfred warns, "Are you ready to risk everything, Hans? This path requires courage and hard work." After much deliberation, Hans agrees. This decision marks the beginning of their partnership, which will soon lead to the founding of the Wilsdorf and Davis Company. Hans and Alfred make an important decision: to go to London and meet with a major investor who can support their idea. On the way to London, Hans experiences an internal struggle. He again thinks about the doubts that tormented him before. He remembers those who laughed at his dreams. What if I'm wrong? But Alfred, who notices his anxiety, tells him, You've already taken the first step, Hans. This path will not be easy, but you are not alone. We must believe in our idea, or someone else will believe in it for us. In London, they meet with the investor. This is an important moment in which they must demonstrate not only their confidence, but also the persuasiveness of their idea. The investor listens to their story for a long time and then asks several difficult questions. Hans feels the tension, but decides that he cannot turn back. He answers with such confidence that the investor finally agrees to invest in their project. This decision is the moment of crossing the first threshold. Hans and Alfred now have the necessary funds and support to make their dream a reality. They face difficulties in finding craftsmen willing to work on the new wristwatches. Many watch specialists do not believe in the concept and consider it unpromising. However, Hans, inspired by Alfred's guidance, decides that they need to seek out and work only with the best. He finds an experienced watchmaker, Georges Simon, who agrees to participate in the project. Georges becomes their first ally, creating the first working prototype of the watch. But even with this success, the problems do not end. Hans faces a difficulty. They cannot find suppliers for a high-quality mechanism and case that meets their high standard. Here, a second ally enters the scene, the well-known designer Louis Martin. He agrees to work on a design that will combine elegance and functionality. With him, Hans and Alfred develop a unique style for their wristwatches, which will later become the brand's hallmark. Meanwhile, the first enemies also appear. Competitors who have long occupied their niche in the market begin to see the new brand as a threat. They begin to spread rumors that the new product will not withstand competition, that wristwatches are nothing more than an empty fad. Many well-known brands begin to try to discredit Hans's idea, using their connections in the industry. Hans and Alfred, despite the pressure, decide not to retreat and continue their work. They understand that in order to achieve success, they need not only to create a quality product, but also to build a marketing strategy. They arrange private showings, organize meetings with potential clients and partners, but no one is ready to place large orders. Many people who have seen the watches doubt their durability, and many believe that such an expensive product simply will not be in demand. Hans becomes increasingly worried, feeling that their dream could collapse in an instant. But at this moment, an idea comes to him. Instead of simply selling watches as a product, they need to create a unique image that will speak for itself. He decides that Rolex will not just be a brand, but a symbol of quality and success that cannot be bought without a certain status. Hans decides to use the power of storytelling, and they begin to work on establishing the brand as part of high society. They offer watches to major businessmen, famous athletes, and other influential figures who can become the first brand ambassadors. At this time, another challenge emerges. Their watches fall into the hands of an influential journalist who has criticized them and is ready to destroy their reputation. This moment represents the culmination of their journey. Hans must prove that his dream and product are worth fighting for. At an important reception organized by Hans and Alfred, the first celebrities begin to show interest in the watches. Noticing how they react to the product, Hans begins to understand that they are on the verge of great success. However, the critic, who is present at the reception, cannot contain his emotions and publishes a negative review. After this, Hans faces a dilemma. Should he allow one person to destroy everything they have built, or show determination and take the brand to a new level? After a negative review from a journalist shook the brand, Hans and Alfred decide it's time for decisive action to prove that Rolex deserves respect and popularity. They understand they can't just sit and wait. Hans decides to create a unique event that will be a moment of truth for their brand. The presentation takes place in a luxurious hall in the center of London. The atmosphere is filled with anticipation, and although doubts still exist, Hans decides that this is his last chance. When the watches begin to demonstrate their uniqueness, precision, and elegance, surprise and admiration start to appear on the faces of those present. At the climax of the event, a well-known businessman who had previously expressed doubts about the brand's potential appears. He decides to purchase a pair of watches, which becomes a real signal for the market. Rolex's reputation begins to grow. In the finale of the story, Hans, having overcome all the trials, stood at the peak of success. Rolex had become not just a brand, but a symbol of mastery, innovation, and high status. Each new watch that came out with the Rolex logo became a work of art, becoming part of watchmaking history and embodying the philosophy of the ideal. However, Hans understands that success is not the final point. He is no longer just the creator of a brand, but a person who has created something more than just watches. Rolex has become part of culture, part of history, part of everyone who wears it. This recognition was his true reward. In a moment of personal satisfaction, Hans meets his old friend Alfred, who has always supported him. Alfred, though happy for the success, finds deep meaning in the conversation with Hans. He asks a question that at first glance may seem simple. What will happen after you? This is not just a philosophical question, but something more. A search for immortality. Hans understands that his goal now is not only to preserve the brand, but also to pass it on, to ensure that Rolex continues to live and inspire new generations. At this stage, Hans decides that it is time to pass on his knowledge and experience so that the next wave of masters can continue his work. He establishes a school where young talents can learn the art of watchmaking. This school will exist for many years, passing on the craftsmanship and philosophy embedded in Rolex to future generations. In addition, Hans decides that his name will remain in history not only as the creator of the brand, but also as someone who understood the value of art and strived for perfection. He makes Rolex not just a brand, but a legacy that will live long after him. This final step brings him satisfaction. He understands that his life and his work are not just a commercial achievement, but part of a great cultural and historical tradition.
Friends, this is probably all for today. Write your opinion about this amazing story in the comments. Also rate the video and subscribe to the channel, and we will do our best for you.